For decades, learning a foreign language meant one of three things: sitting in a classroom with an underpaid teacher conjugating verbs until your brain melted, spending hundreds of dollars on chunky CD-ROM software that promised fluency in 30 days, or booking a one-way ticket to a foreign country and hoping for the best. The language learning industry was comfortable, profitable, and completely unprepared for what was about to hit them. In 2011, a green owl appeared on the scene with a simple proposition. What if learning a language could be as addictive as playing Angry Birds? That owl's name was Duolingo, and it was about to torch a multi-billion-dollar industry built on expensive software, overpriced courses, and the false promise that language learning had to be painful to be effective. The language learning market in 2010 was dominated by giants who had grown fat and lazy on consumer desperation. Rosetta Stone, the undisputed king of the mountain, was charging anywhere from $200 to $500 for their software packages. Their yellow boxes sat in Best Buy and Target stores like digital snake oil, promising immersive learning through their patented dynamic immersion method. Berlitz was still running physical centers in major cities, charging thousands for intensive courses that required students to completely rearrange their lives. Pimsleur audio courses cost hundreds of dollars for monotonous listening exercises that would put an insomniac to sleep. The entire industry operated on a simple principle: if it's expensive and difficult, it must be worth it. Students were paying premium prices for products that had success rates hovering somewhere between disappointing and abysmal, with most people abandoning their language learning dreams within the first month. Enter Luis von Ahn, a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon University, who had already revolutionized internet security by inventing CAPTCHA. Von Ahn looked at the language learning landscape and saw something that offended his sensibilities as both an educator and a technologist, an industry that was actively hostile to learning. He had a radical idea that would have made traditional language companies laugh him out of the room. What if language learning was free? What if it was actually fun? What if instead of punishing students for mistakes, you rewarded them for progress? In 2011, von Ahn and his graduate student Severin Hacker launched Duolingo with a revolutionary concept: gamified language learning that cost absolutely nothing and actually worked better than the expensive alternatives. Duolingo's genius wasn't just in making language learning free, though that alone was enough to give Rosetta Stone executives nightmares. The real innovation was treating language acquisition like a video game instead of a chore. Every lesson became a level to complete. Every correct answer earned experience points. Students could maintain learning streaks, unlock achievements, and compete with friends on leaderboards. The app introduced the concept of hearts as lives, lingots as in-game currency, and skill trees that visualized progress in a way that made sense to the human brain. Instead of dry conjugation tables, students were translating sentences about bizarre scenarios involving purple elephants and men eating apples in restaurants. The lessons were bite-sized, designed to be completed in 5 to 10 minutes, which meant busy people could actually stick with the program. Most importantly, Duolingo made mistakes feel like part of the game rather than personal failures, using spaced repetition algorithms to bring back challenging concepts at optimal intervals. The traditional language learning companies initially dismissed Duolingo as a toy. How could a free app possibly compete with their sophisticated, research-backed methodologies? They were about to find out just how wrong sophisticated and research-backed could be when those methodologies were wrapped in user experiences that felt like digital torture. Duolingo launched with just 3 languages: Spanish, French, and German. Within 6 months, the app had attracted over 1 million users who were spending an average of 34 minutes per day on the platform. By comparison, most Rosetta Stone customers were lucky to complete 10% of their purchased courses. The green owl was sending daily notifications that felt friendly rather than naggy, reminding users to practice with messages like, "These reminders don't seem to be working. We'll stop sending them for now." This reverse psychology approach worked brilliantly, often motivating users to return just to prove the owl wrong. As Duolingo's user base exploded, traditional companies began to panic. Rosetta Stone's stock price started a long, painful decline from its 2009 peak of over $18 per share. The company tried to adapt by launching Rosetta Stone Totally, an online subscription service, but they made the fatal error of trying to simply port their existing methodology to a new platform. They completely missed the point that the methodology itself was the problem. Meanwhile, Duolingo was expanding rapidly, adding new languages and refining their algorithms based on data from millions of real users. By 2013, Duolingo had 15 million registered users and was adding new ones at a rate of 1 every 20 seconds. The app had expanded to include Italian, Portuguese, Dutch, and Irish, with each new language launch generating massive media attention and user excitement. The data began telling a story that was impossible for the industry to ignore. Independent studies started showing that 34 hours of Duolingo was equivalent to a full semester of college-level language instruction. City University of New York conducted research demonstrating that Duolingo users showed statistically significant improvement in reading, writing, and listening comprehension after just 8 weeks of use. The most damning finding was that Duolingo users had dramatically higher completion rates than users of traditional software. While Rosetta Stone struggled with completion rates below 20%, Duolingo users were maintaining learning streaks measured in months and years. The gamification wasn't just making learning more enjoyable, it was making it more effective. By 2014, Duolingo had crossed 50 million users and was valued at over $400 million, despite giving away their core product for free. Their business model was brilliantly simple: offer the basic experience for free, then monetize through premium subscriptions that removed ads and offered offline access, and through their English proficiency test that institutions could use for admissions. They also introduced Duolingo for Schools, a free platform that teachers could use to track student progress, which began displacing expensive educational software in classrooms around the world. The company was generating revenue without exploiting their users, proving that you could build a sustainable business by actually serving your customers well, rather than trapping them in expensive commitments they couldn't fulfill. The traditional language learning industry began its death spiral in earnest around 2015. Rosetta Stone's revenue dropped from over $250 million in 2010 to less than $200 million in 2015, while their stock price continued its relentless decline. Berlitz closed dozens of learning centers as students migrated to mobile platforms. Pimsleur was sold to Simon & Schuster as its parent company tried to cut losses. The irony was palpable. Companies that had built their reputations on teaching communication were completely unable to communicate with a new generation of learners who expected technology to be intuitive, engaging, and respectful of their time. These companies had confused difficulty with effectiveness for so long that they couldn't adapt when someone proved that learning could be both easy and powerful. Duolingo's impact extended far beyond just displacing expensive software. The platform democratized language learning in ways that fundamentally changed who could access linguistic education. Students in developing countries who could never afford Rosetta Stone suddenly had access to world-class language instruction. The app became a lifeline for immigrants seeking to learn English, refugees trying to integrate into new communities, and ambitious professionals looking to expand their global opportunities. By 2016, Duolingo had over 100 million registered users and was being used in classrooms in over 200 countries. The platform had expanded to include constructed languages like Klingon and High Valyrian, proving that their methodology could work even with fictional languages that had no native speakers. The final nail in the traditional industry's coffin came with Duolingo's introduction of stories in 2017, which provided engaging narrative content that helped users develop reading and listening skills through compelling short fiction. The feature was developed using machine learning algorithms that could adapt to individual user proficiency levels, something that static CD-ROM software could never match. Duolingo also launched podcasts, chatbots for conversation practice, and augmented reality features that let users learn vocabulary by pointing their phone cameras at real-world objects. Each innovation widened the gap between dynamic, data-driven learning and the fossilized approaches of traditional companies. By 2018, the transformation was complete. Duolingo had reached 300 million users worldwide, making it larger than the entire traditional language learning industry combined. The platform was offering courses in over 30 languages, with new ones being developed through their community-driven incubator program that allowed native speakers to create courses for their languages. Rosetta Stone's stock had fallen to under $20 per share, a fraction of its former value, and the company was desperately trying to reinvent itself as a corporate training solution. The broader lesson was clear. When you build a product that actually serves users instead of exploiting them, when you use technology to enhance learning rather than complicate it, and when you prioritize accessibility over profit margins, you don't just disrupt an industry, you obliterate it and replace it with something infinitely better. The Duolingo revolution proved that the emperor of traditional language learning had no clothes. For years, companies had convinced consumers that effective learning required significant financial investment and considerable suffering. They had built business models around the assumption that people would pay hundreds of dollars for products they would never finish, then blame themselves for lacking motivation or aptitude. Duolingo exposed this entire framework as a lie. The green owl showed that motivation was a design problem, not a character flaw, and that the most effective learning experiences feel like play rather than work. In destroying the traditional language learning industry, Duolingo didn't just change how we learn languages, it changed our fundamental expectations about what educational technology should accomplish and who it should serve.